Okay, so it's 6:30, I see, and I understand one commissioner will be absent. So am I correct? We have all commissioners present and quorum?
We have all commissioners present in a quorum. However, we are still waiting for Brent Cooper, Community Development Director, to arrive.
Okay,
He should be signing in momentarily.
alrighty.
Okay, Chair Navarro, we have everyone present.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. I call to order the Planning Commission for the City of American Canyon. So call to order. I'll go ahead and lead with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone. Can we go ahead and have roll call, Ms. Jones?
Yes, Commissioner Altman,
Present.
Commissioner Goff,
Present.
Commissioner Wong,
Present.
Vice Chair Malari is absent this evening. Chair Navarro.
Present. Okay, do you want to go ahead and
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Okay.
Thank you for joining us for the October 28th, 2021 City of American Canyon Planning Commission meeting. This meeting is being held entirely virtually in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The format for tonight will be similar to that of an in-person Planning Commission meeting. In addition to the Zoom platform, the meeting is being broadcast on cable TV channel 28, on YouTube, and streamed live on the city's website. You will see members of the Planning Commissioner on your screen, along with members of city staff. All members of the public will participate in listen-only mode. Public comment is invited for non-agenda items during the public forum section of the meeting and on each agenda item. When the item you wish to speak on is called, please follow these steps to make your comment. When the chairman calls a particular item and you wish to speak on that item, click the raise hand button if joining by computer. If joining by phone, dial *9 and raise your hand. When it is your turn, I will announce your name and invite you to speak. You may see a message saying the host would like you to unmute your microphone. If you get this message, click unmute myself and begin speaking. To unmute yourself by phone, dial *6 and begin speaking. Video will not be turned on, only audio. You have up to 3 minutes to make your comments to the Planning Commission. At the end of 3 minutes, I will ask you to complete your comments quickly and I will mute your audio once you're done. Please only press *9 to raise your hand for the items you wish to speak on, as raised hands will be cleared at the end of each item. The agenda for this meeting is available on the city's website. As a standard practice, community members are allowed to comment one time on each agenda item. All votes for tonight's meeting will be taken by roll call, and we ask your patience and understanding when there are technical difficulties. This concludes my opening remarks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Jones. So we'll open public comment. Let me give my warning before opening public comment. Public comment is a time reserved for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of interest that are not on the agenda and are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Comments for items on the agenda will be taken when the item is called. Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda. and no adverse conclusions should be drawn if the Planning Commission does not respond to public comment at this time. Speakers are asked to please speak clearly and provide their name. Any handouts for distribution to the Planning Commission must be mailed by 3 p.m. on the meeting day. To comment via Zoom during the meeting, click raise your hand button if joining by computer, or press star 9 if joining by phone. When the item is called, to avoid confusion, hands raised outside public comment periods will be lowered. Okay, with that, go ahead and, is there anybody wishing to make public comment?
If you have comments for anything that it does not appear on the agenda this evening, please raise your hand now. No one is raising their hand.
Okay, with that, we will close public comment. Director Cooper, are there any agenda changes, or anybody from the commission wishes to change the agenda?
Chair Navarro, staff has no proposed changes to the agenda tonight.
Okay, great, thank you. And I will do this. This should make City Attorney happy. Are there any disclosures of ex parte communications for today's agenda by the commissioners? This would be the time to make those, please. Okay, Commissioner Wong.
I did have a discussion with Mr. Hess about the Hampton Inn, and I also talked with Patrick Band of the Bike Coalition about the Hampton Inn as well, and bicycling.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Altman?
I too had a brief conversation with Rick Hess regarding the Hampton Inn project, and that was it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any other disclosures at this time? Okay, I have none. Okay. So then I guess we can move next to the consent calendar. When we have more than one, so we can just do one motion for both items, is that correct? Okay.
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
Okay, so do we have a motion, or do we want to have any discussion? I know there was some modified language. So Commissioner Wong?
Hi, yes. I know there were some last minute emails that came out, and I didn't have a chance to look at them all fully. William, you and I had an email exchange. Did that get updated, or can you maybe give me an update about the recycled water, just that one phrasing?
Well, that's going to be updated. I talked with Brent and Nicole yesterday, and we just wanted to see if any other commissioners had any other comments that they wanted to address on it, and it will all get updated at the same time.
Oh, okay. So,
Is this in relation to the permit resolution?
This is in relation to the PG&E permit resolution. Sorry. Yeah, and Ms. Wong had clarified some language in condition 12.
Okay. All right. So then I guess before we make a motion, is there any other language adjustments proposed or wanting for discussed by the commissioners?
Chair Navarro, just for clarity, can I just share what I had discussed with William?
Absolutely. Yes.
So my point was, when we talked about the landscaping plan at the substation, we had also requested that it used recycled water if available. And it was just a typo to make it say recycled water. That's all it was.
Oh. The use of recycled, it was just missing water?
Yeah, that's all it was. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we can approve the consent, what's on the consent calendar, as long as in item 12 of the resolution for the PG&E, that the word water is added to the after recycled, which shall incorporate the use of recycled water, comma, if feasible.
Chair Navarro, I have one other question, just clarification.
Sure.
It's on page 9, item 19 under planning,
Okay.
where it starts talking, or it talks about all planting shall be maintained in good growing conditions, such as maintenance shall include, and it talks about maintaining. Does that include the landscaping at the new subdivision, or is that just specific for the landscaping at the project site? That's my question. I don't know.
I would believe that that is for the PG&E site at the primary site, but then the substation site will have to go through a letter agreement with the city, and then there will be more language specifically on maintenance.
So when that plan, because that plan has to be submitted to us first. We
Yes,
can ensure
yes.
that. Okay, thank you. That solved my answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Altman, are you good with the resolution and incorporating water? Perfect. Okay. So can I entertain from someone a motion to approve the consent calendar, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar with the noted change that we discussed for the PG&E design permit to address the typo in item number 12 to add the word water after recycled.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Can we have a roll call, please, Ms. Jones?
Yes. Commissioner Altman,
Aye.
Commissioner Gall,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Vice Chair Malari is absent. Chair Navarro.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. So we can go to the public hearing section of our meeting today. Item 3 for zoning code amendment to prohibit new and expanded service stations in all zoning districts in the city of American Canyon that can conduct motor vehicle fossil fuel retail sales.
Thank you, Chair Navarro, Planning Commission, and public that's viewing today. I'm Brent Cooper, Community Development Director, and pleased to present the fuel station ordinance. This is a follow-up to the moratorium that was adopted this spring, and the general plan, climate change, and adaptation policies that the Planning Commission recommended approval this fall, and the City Council approved also just quite recently. I have a brief well, it's not that brief, but I have a presentation for you, if you don't mind sharing the screen, and then I can kind of walk you through some of the changes. Kind of hesitated on it being brief because it's text heavy, which is not really my style for presentations, but in this case, since there are a lot of zoning amendments, it's one of those things that we just kind of have to go through. I'll try to make it as clear as possible. We kind of navigate through the different languages and the different parts of the zoning code that need to be amended. Just as a quick way of background, this is of course been mentioned before and in the news all the time about the significant and negative effects of climate change on our economy and climate, way of life, and just a whole host of areas that touch us. City has a long history of commitment to sustainability, and this is just kind of following along lines with that. The most recent one would be the city's proclamation to support a countywide climate action committee. As well, I probably should have added in the climate change general plan policies to that. But also the City Council, just for your information, is supporting a climate emergency proclamation or resolution that's going to be coming up in a near-term agenda item for the City Council as well. I think we're all familiar now at this point that the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in California is from transportation, with the single largest source being passenger vehicles. So there's a tie-in here to service stations that sell fossil fuels. I have an updated map for you on the status of fuel stations in American Canyon. Of course, we have our 3 existing stations, the Chevron, Union 76, and Safeway in the blue stars. Circle K in the red star is now under construction, and the 7-Eleven station has been proposed for some time. It's on hold pending the urgency ordinance. And then here we had a Rotten Robbie station at the corner of Highway 29 and Donaldson Way, and they've withdrawn their application, so that one's no longer in a possibility or a consideration. As with most zoning code amendments, there is a tie-in to our general plan, and we have a fresh general plan policies to reference. I think the related ones that were adopted have to do with the overall goal to adopt decisive near-term action, reduce greenhouse gas emissions with an objective to reduce direct and indirect sources from new, renovated, and existing development in the city. And so service stations would be in that category. And then more specifically with the policy to prohibit construction of new fossil fuel stations in American Canyon. So this kind of ordinance follows along line with that policy. Jumping right into zoning code amendments, there are a variety of places in the code that would need to be amended to accommodate this. And the first one would be the introduction of a new definition for a zero emission vehicle. And there's a number of words there, but I think some of the operative ones are there are vehicles that have no tailpipe emissions, and they would consist of plug-in electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel electric vehicles primarily. We have an area in our zoning code called use classifications, and this is when you are looking up what does any of the uses in the zoning code actually mean. This is where you'll find where they're defined. And in looking at the zoning code, kind of like renovating a house, when you remove a wall, you might find something you didn't know about or realize. And in this case, we actually have 2 redundant definitions for gas stations. We have one called gas stations and automobile service facilities, and then we have service station. If we look at the zoning code, service station wins. It's just shown more in the zoning code than gas station. So we don't need 2 definitions for the same thing. And so this sort of is a cleanup item. We would delete this one here, gas stations and automobile service facilities. Getting more into more of the substance of the matter, we have a definition for service station, and so what this zoning code amendment would do is we have 2 types. We have the fossil fuel service station, and this is a service station that is primarily selling retail motor vehicle fossil fuels, and then incidental goods and services. And then there's a whole lot of words after that talking about incidental maintenance and such. And so that would be a distinction for a service station. We're just specifically describing one that sells fossil fuels. The other one would be a zero emission vehicle service station. And so this would be a service station with retail electric vehicle fuel sales. And then we have in highlighted in yellow, the very same language is in the fossil fuel is here with incidental maintenance of vehicles and the like. We also wanted to add in here a point that we expect there are going to be electric vehicle charging stations popping up in a whole lot of places. If you go to City Hall today, there's 3, I think, there in front. That's not a service station. It's an accessory use. So an accessory use is something that supports a primary use. So you go to City Hall not necessarily to charge your car. You go to City Hall because you have business at City Hall, but while you're there, you can charge your car. So that makes the charging stations and accessory use. And we expect that we'll see these charging stations, we already do in parking lots of other businesses. And so those are accessory uses, and it's not a service station, it's a convenience, an accessory use. So just wanted to make that point. So diving a little deeper here in the zoning code, in our commercial districts, there's this enormous chart that has all the possible uses that one could have in commercial districts. And we have neighborhood commercial and community commercial. And so instead of presenting you this enormous chart with a little change in the middle of it, I just sort of listed what might be done to the chart. And so there is, in fact, gas stations and automobile service stations is listed, so we'll just delete that. In the service station, today it's conditionally permitted in both neighborhood and community commercial, and so that would be changed to prohibited. And then we'll be rename that fossil fuel service station. So fossil fuel service stations are prohibited in these districts. And then we'll add zero emission service station, and that's a conditionally permitted use. So that's a way in which the zoning uses in commercial districts can switch over to allowing zero emission service stations, but not fossil fuel service stations. Interestingly enough, their service stations just aren't allowed in other zoning districts in the rest of the city, except for the Broadway District plan, which I'll get to next. So with the Broadway District, it has its own table, and automobile service stations, it's today listed as gas stations, and so we'll delete that, and then we'll add zero emission as a condition permitted use in the business park zoning district. So the business park zoning district is largely in the northern end of the Broadway District, up closer to the industrial park, around Napa Junction Road, City Hall's in Business Park, the property that has the wood lot is Business Park, and the property north of that. So it's a limited area, and then also what we call the balloon property, which is to the east of the highway, north of the Dunkin' Donuts and Tractor Supply Center, and the Reliant Apartments. When you have a use that was permitted and becomes not permitted, it becomes in the category of a non-conforming use. And so we want to make sure that we approach this appropriately. When something becomes not permitted in the zoning code, it's still allowed to operate. And that exists for anything that might at one time have been allowed but is no longer. And as long as it continuously operates, it's fine. You can just keep doing that. And so what we can now call fossil fuel stations are a little, special situation that I think we need some special discussion about, just to make sure we're clear on what happens to them now that they're not permitted in the city. And so we have a new section proposed in our non-conforming part of the zoning code that specifically addresses fossil fuel service stations. And so here at the high level purpose, it would allow continued fossil fuel service station operation as a legal non-conforming use. So the second part talks about allowing it to be altered for very specific purposes. And I'll get into that a little further in the ordinance. And then they would be prohibited from increasing or expanding their capacity or service. And those are typical restrictions on a non-conforming use. You don't generally want to grow it. kind of want to let it stay as it is.
Director Cooper, can I ask a question?
Of course, yes.
An existing service station, fuel service station, whatever it may be, changes ownership. Is that affected under this or not?
No, it's a land use restriction, but not an ownership. That's a good question. And so the next section, applicability, these are kind of a typical way in which the zoning approaches issues. And so this non-conforming section would apply to all lawfully operating fossil fuel service stations today. And of course, we have our 3. And then also any fossil fuel service station that's not yet developed, and or operating subject to an unexpired use permit. And that would apply to the Circle K that's under construction because it has a lawfully approved use permit. But it would not apply to, for example, the 7-Eleven application because there is no use permit for that right now. And so this next section talks about modifications to fossil fuel stations. So I kind of highlighted areas just to kind of give you a sense of what it's talking about without reading everything. So generally, except as provided below, which is D, E, F, and G, they would not be allowed to be enlarged, extended, or reconstructed. So, and so that would be, it's kind of the idea with the non-conforming uses, you generally want it to phase out over time. And so that's, that they can, remain, as long as they remain in operation, they're fine. There are some changes, though, that we can envision that might be appropriate. And those would be over time. You think about the old days, they had single-hulled underground storage tanks, and now they're double-hulled storage tanks. There are no doubt going to be over time, it's not surprising, there could be new requirements for health and safety associated with fuel stations. And so modifications that deal with health and safety issues, standards and the like, that would be an allowable modification. It's not surprising if we had some fuel stations that added battery charging stations. So that would be another one that would be allowed to accommodate a change to an existing fuel station. And then perhaps also alter to allow hydrogen storage and the like. If there are, kind of back into if they're continuously used. And so item G here is talking about, well, what happens if for some reason, maybe change of ownership, we've had a situation with a former gas station, I think it was USA Gas, that's right next to the general plumbing supply. There was a gas station there. It stopped operating for a period of time, and then it started again. And so under this ordinance, if you had a gas station that for whatever reason just stopped operating for a period of 12 months or longer, well, then that's it. You can't restart it. And so that's one of the issues with the non-conforming use. You kind of want to, over time, kind of phase them out. So if there is a reason for it to stop operating for 12 months or more, well, then that's it. An exception to that, and I got to kind of highlight it here in yellow, there may be, as I mentioned above, there could be modifications for a variety of reasons where they get permits, they're changing out tanks. You can't sell gas if the tanks are being swapped out. There are legitimate reasons why there could be periods of time when the fuel stations stop operating. Maybe it's 12 months or more. There's all kinds of reasons why that might happen. The tank is on a container in LA Harbor. Yeah, hard to imagine, something in the future that might happen that could, stop someone for no reason, no reason of their own, and so this would be a construction permit that is active, but it hasn't had its final inspection. If there's a process here somewhere along the way that's legitimate, above board, just can't get it done in 12 months, then there is an exception that takes that into consideration so that people can make legitimate improvements and not have some other external event, could be the gotcha, keep them from operating. So, that's it. Hope that's okay and made sense to everybody. Kind of moving along with a schedule. This is tentatively scheduled pending your review for November 16. Being an ordinance, it's a public hearing. The ordinance process requires a first reading is kind of the term that's used for the public hearing. If that's approved, then it would move forward for what's called the second reading or final reading. That's a consent item typically. That would happen on December 2nd. And then the ordinance takes effect 30 days later, which coincidentally would fall on January 1st. We always consider California Environmental Quality Act to ordinances, and this one would be exempt under a couple of different sections of the California Environmental Quality Act. And with that, I just have a recommendation to adopt a resolution to recommend City Council approval. So I know I threw a lot of information at you and it's kind of technical, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I have one follow-up for you.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about the gas stations. I understand continual use with possible exemptions. How about like some type of natural disaster, some way the building gets damaged, it has to be rebuilt for code or whatever. Is that included in there somehow, or there's a fire, it burns down, are they allowed to rebuild?
That would be a reason. That is not covered by the ordinance today. If there was a natural disaster or a burn down, then that would be it.
That would be it. Couldn't rebuild. Done.
As the ordinance is proposed today.
This is Bill. I think there may be common law provisions that, depending upon the extent of the natural disaster, that reconstruction of what existed prior to that act of God, so to speak, there is common law authority to allow it to be rebuilt.
Okay. Well, I'll work with the city attorney to add common law language into those exceptions, just to make sure that's clear.
Okay, thank you.
What's nice about bringing ordinances to the Planning Commission is it's kind of like a working session. So we're able to get your feedback and work through some of these details.
I'll jump in. So I guess I have a question and also a comment. So my comment is I have an electric car. I also have a fossil fuel car. And we had to take them in for servicing to get new tires. And one service station was able to accommodate both cars. And I just offer that because I see there's a new category for EV service station. And it may not necessarily be that it's an EV service station that services an EV car. I just wanted to throw that out there in case that helps with your thinking about how this is written.
Let me go back and check and see if there is I know that we have language in both definitions that talk about incidental car repair. And so in both cases, the wording is identical. It doesn't differentiate between an EV service station can only serve as EV cars. So that helps give some flexibility, like you were saying. So thank you. Yeah, that's the great thing about zoning codes. There's these unintended consequences that can creep in. So appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And my other question was around the discontinuation period. I notice it says 12 months as the threshold. I was hoping you could give us more context as to why 12 months. Is there precedent for that? Is that a number you picked? Is that something you may have seen in another ordinance, say that Petaluma has done? Because I know they've done something similar already. I'd love more background if you can.
Thank you. Yes, it was taken from the Petaluma ordinance. I believe other non-conforming uses in the city, it's a shorter period of time. Let me just look that up right now. And so this would be a more generous period of time than other non-conforming uses in the city. But let me just verify that.
While Director Cooper is looking that up, why don't Commissioner Wong, do you want to discuss that as an issue? Do you think that time frame is too long, too short, adequate?
Well, so it was,
Irregardless of the standard.
yeah, I think it does merit some discussion. And I actually would be interested to know if we have any public comment specifically about this new item that's being added, and if what
Yes, we will.
you know, yeah, that may help influence our further discussion.
Okay, all right. But from your perspective, do you feel it's adequate?
What my initial thought when I read it, it seemed a long time, because if the fuel station, which is the primary purpose of the business, if it's non-operable, 12 months seemed like a long time for me to have a business not in use and still have it remain viable as a viable business. I thought it was too generous, but notwithstanding all the context behind it, I wanted to hear what Director Cooper's, thinking was behind this proposal before I, said too much.
Okay.
I did look it up, Commissioner Wong, and the code section is 19.49.040. Limitations to non-conforming uses. And it says that a non-conforming use may be continued as long as it's continuous, unless it ceases continuous period of 180 days. So that'd be half a year.
6 months.
Right. Okay. So we do have precedent then for 180 days within the city.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you for that additional context. I appreciate that.
Okay. Are there any other commissioner comments or questions before I open public comment? No? Okay, Ms. Jones, let's go ahead and open public comment on this item.
Okay. If you are in attendance and would like to make public comment, please raise your hand now. We have Lori Stelling. Lori, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes. Okay. Please unmute yourself.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Excellent. My name's Lori Stelling, and I am calling in speaking on behalf of Napa Climate Now. And I have a pre-approved by the steering committee statement to read, but I just want to answer Tammy Wong's question and with regard to the number of months in which a fuel station shall be permanently discontinued. And Napa Climate Now did not have comment on that, though I am I'm sure that 6 months would be the preference of Napa Climate Now to 12 if given the option. So I just wanted to share that. But we just want to congratulate the City of American Canyon on your continued process of creating a moratorium on all new fossil fuel stations, including your newly added specifications as to when unused fossil fuel stations shall be permanently discontinued. We applaud your efforts in this whole process, and we really hope that American Canyon can serve as an example to other jurisdictions throughout the valley on how to move forward together towards a fossil-free future. So thank you so much for your work.
Okay, thank you.
And Chris James has his hand up. I'm going to
Okay.
allow you to speak. Chris, please unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, repeat something that the last caller said. I do appreciate everyone's hard work on this and doing due diligence. It's exciting to see the city making progress on this. And I would like to repeat or I guess enhance on what Commissioner Wong said about servicing EV cars. But there's, and I think Brenda's touched on a lot of that in the documentation. EV cars is just the motor that's different. A lot of the things, the tires, the windscreen, spare, even 12-volt batteries. Most EV cars have 12-volt batteries. Things need changing out. So it's we don't want to kind of limit businesses that will, because of that. So we're just careful with the wording, is that we don't make it so specific that we would lock up businesses. Anyway, so again, thank you very much for everything, and then congratulations on some really good work. Bye now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. James. Any other public comment?
If you have public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Going once, twice. There doesn't seem to be any additional public comment at this time.
Okay, with that, I will go ahead and close public comment. Is there any further, any questions or comments from commissioners? I'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Wong, since there was Climate Now comments regarding the timing.
Yeah, Chair Navarro, I would be interested in discussing with my fellow commissioners the period of required continued uses before we discontinue. I guess my concern is just more the aesthetics, having our city remain looking vibrant, not having, a business be out of use for a year versus, having a shorter period, 6 months, which is still, within our standards, be considered versus the 12 months as it is currently written. I would be interested in hearing other commissioners' perspectives on this.
Need to pop in on that. Unless you want to go first, Mr. Altman.
You're chatting, so Mr. Goff, please go ahead.
My only curiosity is when that 180 days was developed and how it was developed, how long it's been that way, as we are now in an unheralded phase of our existence as a society, and the impact of COVID, which has drastically impacted a lot of businesses in ways that we had no idea. I'm just wondering if there's any looking at that 180 days or other systems that now require extended length because, again, of pandemics, things like that nobody ever predicts. I know there's restaurants that have been closed for an extended period of time because of COVID. Well, it's not a gas station, but that's kind of the same thing. It's an economic draw. So I'm a little concerned about that, but I think the 180 days is good as well, unless a business is totally destroyed, then, I'm just a little concerned about that. And I want, when was that 180 days defined, and is it still the norm?
Okay.
Just Commissioner Goff, FYI, the 180 days in the non-conforming ordinance has been there since 2001.
Commissioner Altman?
Commissioner Goff sort of stole my thunder there. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I was gonna chime in on, how long have we had a city standard for other businesses that was 180 days versus the 1 year we're talking about here? I understand where our director got the notion of 1 year from another community's ordinance. But I do think that unless there are some extenuating circumstances, and so I guess what I would ask is, given the issues that Commissioner Goff brought up, such as pandemic and whatnot, where businesses kind of through no fault of their own have in certain cases been closed down for a greater than 6 month period, I'd ask the city attorney how, if we modified the language here to 180 days, might that play in, and would there be legal precedents out there to extend that? Because I think where Commissioner Goff was going, and certainly where I'm going, is if it's a viable business that through kind of no fault of its own has been shut down, to lose their opportunity to continue that business would seem terribly unfair. So that's sort of where I'd look at it and see if there's any information that's available on it. Otherwise, candidly, I would be very much in support of reducing the time from the 1 year to the 180 days to conform with the rest of the city guidelines.
Commission members, I think the one observation I'd make is when you're talking about discontinuance or termination of a non-conforming use, you're talking about a property right. So anytime you're talking about a property right, there's got to be due process. The specific issue raised is about this time for reestablishing the business. In a lot of situations with declarations of local, state, and federal emergency, there will be a provision that says that during the time of the declared emergency, acts otherwise required by law, are suspended, right, or stayed, right? That's not uniform, but that's one aspect. Certainly we could look at this to, have a modification. Another collective term is force majeure, things beyond the control of the property owner, right? Keep in mind, the concept here is the use runs with the land. It's not personal. So the time, I think there has to be a balance, but I think we could probably provide for a force majeure provision that could be integrated into this. And that would be under, I'm just looking at a collection of cases here, that would certainly include things like declarations of local or state emergency, right? But again, there's usually at the other end, on the declaring side, there's a provision that does that. But the way to integrate that into this ordinance would be to have a provision that the time would be exclusive of events of force majeure, earthquake, famine, whatever. Boxcars in offshore.
Okay. Well, I would be in favor of having the timing kind of conform to the previous other non-conforming timeline of 6 months. I could see making it even shorter if we're in this case with fossil fuel stations and being under a climate emergency. But I think 6 months gives enough time, and if there were force majeure or other extending circumstances, then I imagine that would come to the city council in those unique cases, and we only really have 4 potentially in the future that this would apply to. So I would. It sounds like we are probably in agreement that we should change that timeline. Is there any administrative or procedural challenges to changing the timing, the 1 year, the 12 months to 6 months? Or
I mean, this is an opportunity for the Planning Commission to weigh in and consider the ordinance, and so kind of that's why we're here, is to get your feedback and suggested changes as part of that process.
Okay. Good. So, are there any other questions about this? I mean, we've been discussing this for quite some time. It is a very thorough report. Thank you, Mr. Cooper, and a lot of detail. And we've learned a lot from all the materials before this and your presentation and the previous. I have no further questions. Does anyone else have any further questions?
No, I don't. My only question was about this 12-month period, and I concur with my fellow commissioners. I support making this period to be 6 months with the rest of the city's ordinances.
Okay.
So would we just need to make a motion with that as an amendment then?
That's correct.
Okay.
Let's just, right before we're ready to vote, let me just double check is an open public comment one more time, just in case. Can we go ahead, open public comment one more time, Ms. Strong?
Yes, Rick Hess. And we actually have a couple. So
Okay.
Rick Hess, please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Hess.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
As I was listening here, I was only thinking of all non-conforming uses within the city and 180 days. And whether it be the fossil fuel stations or some other non-conforming use, if an owner were to pass and the estate or the family were trying to settle the estate and find a new owner, it would be a shame to lose the use that historically had been there. And I don't know if there's some provision in the code that we can make, as Bill had mentioned about the force majeure, but I think now, since you're making these changes, it ought to be a consideration. That would be an unusual circumstance that isn't really listed anywhere. But I think we should have some provision for exceptions for all of our non-conforming uses, rather than leave it at the 180 days, but have some exceptions to that 180 days for extenuating circumstances that might not fall under pandemic or other reasons for shutdown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. Next public comment?
Yes, we have Jim Wilson. Mr. Wilson, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you all, planning commissioners, council, and director of planning, Mr. Cooper. Thank you very much for a fascinating process this past year and a very interesting overview today by you, Brent, and you, commissioners. I just wanted to take a little higher view of this process. We heard Brent talk about the climate element and the process of getting that inserted into the general plan under land use. And it was very exciting for me as a resident of Napa to see, you actually, personify this idea of decisive near-term action. And so I think the substance here is leadership. And I don't know how to say it, but I mean, climate, of course, knows no jurisdictional boundaries. But up in Calistoga right now, they're considering a resolution thanks to your leadership. And in the Climate Action Committee meeting on Friday, we heard two other municipalities tell the students, yeah, we'd like to hear your presentation and to consider your asks because you have given them confidence, and those are St. Helena and Youngville. But I just wanted to say that I have a comment in response to youth appeals for immediate bold action, which is what I think I see with you. And that is what I heard during Friday's Climate Action Committee, and I want to quote, "You should leave any organization you start better than when you get it. And if you apply that to the planet as a generation, we should have left things better than we got it. And in this case, we're doing the reverse. So on behalf of boomers everywhere, I think we need to step up and do what we can before it's too late," end quote. That's American Canyon Vice Mayor Mark Joseph in response to this Schools for Climate Action asks at last week's Countywide Climate Action Committee meeting. And so I just want to commend you all for your humility and your dedication, your diplomacy in working with the other municipalities, and for your daring to step out front in this matter. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any further public comment, Ms. Jones?
Please raise your hand if you have public comment at this time. No additional public comment, Chair Navarro.
Okay, we will go ahead and close public comment. And are we ready for a motion and amendment for this item? Any further questions? One more time. Okay.
Chair Navarro, would you like me to summarize some of the points that I've heard tonight?
Absolutely, sure, that'd be great.
Thank you, Leonard.
The first one would be the city attorney will provide some language with respect to common law in the non-conforming section. We are proposed looking at changing the non-conforming period to 180 days to be consistent with elsewhere in the zoning code with respect to non-conforming uses. Just want to confirm with respect to the language on maintenance services, there's no limitation whether it's a fossil fuel station or an electric vehicle station with respect to which vehicles can be serviced either one.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to clarify that. We've looked up the language there.
Okay.
City attorney would add in a force majeure provision for situations of a declaration of emergency or other extenuating circumstances. And then Mr. Hess raised an interesting issue with respect to what happens with maybe, I'm quite sure the umbrella, but maybe in like estate probate issues. I don't know if that's the right term, but there are situations where assets do get held in abeyance for a period of time to undergo some legal process. State or perhaps others as well. That might need some extra research, perhaps, that could be addressed at the council. Maybe the city attorney would want to weigh in on that one.
I think, the concept of common law and force majeure are probably going to be combined in my analysis. I think the issue about procedures for termination of non-conforming uses might need to be looked at. Whether there is just, these are added views of the commission as this matter goes to council or not. I would weigh in on the side of, I think it's the commission's duty to come up with a firm recommendation on an amendment, as is proposed. So, it'd be my advice at least to, I would agree with what Planning Director Cooper said about amendments. I'd like to make sure that all these sections are internally consistent with respect to the changes made. I think that's one of due diligence, but I think it's the kind of thing that you may wish to have the proposed ordinance brought back to you rather than say, here are our concerns and the city attorney fix it before it gets to the city council. That's my view.
Okay, so we could continue this matter pending so that those adjustments, amendments could be reviewed and consistency could be, reevaluated and ensured. So it could be possibly on the consent calendar for the next meeting.
So would it be, I'm sorry, excuse me, would it be like what we did with the PG&E?
Yeah.
Where we approved it with our own oral modifications and then it comes back on the consent calendar? Is that what you're saying, Chair Navarro?
Yes. Would that work for, I know that would throw the schedule off, Mr. Cooper, but that was how I kind of read it, and it seemed it worked pretty good with PG&E.
Well, like I always say, you can't rush quality.
Okay.
I think the city attorney is referring to perhaps coming back with a subsequent public hearing,
Okay.
opposed to more of a ministerial review of language that kind of had been worked out on the PG&E. I think an ordinance is a little higher level of the document than a design permit.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. I do have one question. So since we have all these other non-conforming policies whose period is 6 months, and we are thinking of moving the fuel service station to be the same 6-month timeline, all these exceptions, these common law exceptions, the force majeure exceptions, probate exceptions, all those same elements apply to all the other non-conforming uses as well. So does that mean that we're also going to be reviewing each one of those? I don't understand why we were going to add specific language then for this one item, or do all the other items already have it in their zoning amendments?
I can respond to part of that. I think I'm still unmuted. Yeah, I am. You've got a particularly intricate provision for non-conforming signs, because that involves political expression, right? Or commercial expression, a different form of a property right. I think the important thing in non-conforming provisions is that there is a specified procedure. If you look at other cities' codes or other county codes in this area, they may treat a variety of non-conforming uses as entirely differently in terms of the procedure for termination. You could think of one right now, particularly applicable would be substandard size housing, in a particular non-conforming zone, right? And then there are going to be a whole variety of state legislation provisions that would be applicable. I don't want to make this more complex than it is, but I think the matter you have before you is one that's of urgency. That's been articulated from the beginning. I think that given the type of changes that you've made, there are further changes that have to be made to fully implement this. We have to make the general plan element internally consistent with other provisions of the general plan also, right, to fully insulate this process. So I don't know that I would say that it should be uniform across the board for commercial and industrial uses that become non-conforming, because they're going to be different considerations that would come before you because of the location of the property, environmental constraints that might be applicable. So that's my response. I think on this specific issue, you've been focused all along on getting a particular goal. So I would think that, yes, I can go look at those other provisions, but, my recommendation would be, I think you want to make this as sound internally as possible, because it's not exactly a normal amendment. You don't have a fully updated general plan to which individual elements are internally consistent. So that's how I'm going to answer your question, Commissioner, is, look, if I think there's a need to do it on other portions of the municipal code, I think I'd discuss it with Brent, and we come back and we say, yeah, maybe we should have a workshop on these 3 areas of permitted uses or categories, and then address that. But, if I look at Chapter 19, which same thing that Director Cooper did, there are other specific uses there that I think there are justifiable reasons for keeping it the way it is. But for this, I think you want to have it internally consistent. I want to address the things that came up. I think the issue on, estate transfer raised by Mr. Hess, I think that's, that's covered. There's a responsibility on the trustee of any estate to maintain assets. So that doesn't mean that there can't be a provision for it in the code, but I would rather make sure that force majeure is covered, for situations like have been mentioned, from those that have been accepted in the past, fire and earthquake, to those that may be applicable now. Health emergencies, certainly critical supply emergencies that were triggered by health emergencies like the storage, transfer, and so forth. I apologize. That's a non-human person in my room that you heard.
Okay.
Thank you. That answered my question. I'm all for consistency and that we get the language we want that will hold up through time. Thank you.
Okay. So it sounds like then we are moving to a continuance of this matter, and then with making the modifications suggested by this hearing to have those modifications integrated into the ordinance, and then review again in another hearing at our next meeting.
So would this come back at our very next meeting, Director Cooper, or is that hard to estimate at this point?
Let's see. Our next meeting is a week earlier than our usual cadence. The term comes up. Mm-hmm. The next meeting is November 18. So what we could do, if that's with the Commission's permission, is continue to a date certain, and then if for some reason we're not able to make that date, we can further continue it later.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you like to make a motion to continue the matter, Commissioner Wong?
I'll make a stab at it. So Brent, do I want to make a motion to continue and mention the items that we're going to change, or it's just the motion with the date?
I have a good notes on the topics, but it wouldn't hurt for purposes of the minutes just to have it there.
Okay. Okay. I will I'll make a motion to continue to our next meeting of November 18th, PC resolution number 2021-XX, to accommodate some updates to make our non-conforming period consistent to be 6 months, which is the standard for other uses in the city from the current 12 months, and to also look at adding language around common law and force majeure to cover other extenuating circumstances.
I'll second that.
Okay, can we go ahead and have a roll call, Ms. Jones?
Yes, Commissioner Altman,
Aye.
Commissioner Gall,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Malari is absent, Vice Chair Navarro.
Aye. Okay, so we will continue this item number 3 to our next meeting in November. So that moves us on to item 4. Hold on, I just had it. I'll read it out. So for item 4, lodging in the local serving mixed use LSMU zoning district and a conditional use permit for a Hampton Inn hotel.
Thank you, Chair Navarro. And William He is our project manager for this, and he has a presentation for you.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Let me get the slideshow up.
And this is for 3 resolutions.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. Can everybody see okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Awesome. So good evening, Chair Navarro, members of the Planning Commission, and members of the public. So I'm here to give a presentation on the Hampton Inn Conditional Use Permit and Zone Change Project. Similar to Brent's presentation, there's a lot of information to go over. I split it into 6 major sections, but hopefully it will go pretty brief. I will talk about the location of the site as well as nearby uses. Then we'll talk about the local serving mixed use LSMU zone change itself. I'll go over some of the site features. And then we'll go to some of the site specific issues. Some of them you've already heard from the previous workshops, but I want to give updates on them. And then lastly, we have our public outreach efforts, the CEQA compliance info, and staff's recommendation. So as Chair Navarro mentioned, this project consists of 3 resolutions. The first one is to recommend adoption of an addendum to the Broadway District specific plan so that the Hampton Inn project will comply with the environmental impact report. And the second one is to recommend adoption of an amendment to the LSMU zone to include hotels as a conditional use permit. Conditionally permitted use. Currently, the hotels are not permitted in that zone. And the last resolution is to recommend approval of the Hampton Inn project itself. This project we've been working on for quite some time, but there's a lot of different pieces to the project. I do want to go over some of the important milestones of it. The project started with a submittal in August of 2020, and in December of last year, we had the first City Council workshop that went through the project and identified some specific issues to resolve. In March of this year, we received the applicant's hotel marketing study. There were some concerns of having a new hotel in the city and if demand was there for it. And the marketing study did address it. And then we had the Broadway specific plan addendum report that was submitted in June. The city reviewed it with the applicant's third-party secret consultant, and we found that it was ready in August. So we had a follow-up joint city council and planning commission workshop in October 5th, 3 weeks ago. And then here we are today. So lots of little steps, and of course, throughout all that, the applicant was submitting revised plans and updates to their project along the way. So here's the project site, the Hampton Inn site. It's the common address is 3443 Broadway. It is a 2.5 acres. It is rectangular in shape, and it faces Broadway. In explaining the existing site conditions, the site is, what we would say, it's underutilized, and it has a lot of challenges for developers. I have a little list of things that the applicant had to overcome. It's the 2.5 acres. The residence was converted to commercial use. The structures on the north are too close to the property line. There's a non-conforming pole sign in front. It lacks landscaping on the front of the site. There's also an earthquake fault that they had to identify, which is luckily located near the front of the site. And there's also been some instances of like illegal dumping on the site. So lots of challenges, but the applicant has made a lot of efforts to provide a quality hotel on the site. So to overcome the use classification of the hotels, which is prohibited in an LSMU site, the applicant had to apply for a zone change to the LSMU zone. The main thing that they wanted to accomplish is to add lodging into the zone as a permitted use class. Here is a map of the LSMU zones. There are about 4 sites in the zone. I think each site has maybe 1 or 2 parcels within them. Site number 1 is where the Hampton Inn is proposed right now. Site number 2 is the 4-acre site that's at the corner of Crawford and Highway 29. Site number 3 is our friends at the American Canyon Car Wash, General Plumbing, and Navajo Rug. And then the last site is the triangular lot that's to the east of the highway with 3 single-family homes and a unused masonry barn. So when we reviewed the addendum to the Broadway plan, we saw that the LSMU zone and adding the hotel in hotel use was consistent to the zone. The LSMU zone was intended to support existing and future retail local needs, and some of the more common uses are retail, multifamily residential, and offices. And adding a hotel use to it provides customers that support the local businesses that residents would enjoy. The reports show that adding the use class would be SEQA compliant and found no new significant impacts to the Broadway plan. So it's a big endeavor, but what ultimately needs to be done is if we go to look at the table 2-3 of the Broadway plan, it's simply changing the column under local serving mixed use and the row for lodging services from a dash to a C, and changing that would allow conditionally permitted uses to the local serving mixed use zone. Staff looked at the other possibility of making it a design permit, but we felt that with the conditional use permit, it gave a little bit more discretion for the planning commission to see the designs and maybe add like reasonable conditions to projects in the future. So before I get into the project design itself, I do want to say that there is a modification to the resolution. I wanted to see, did everybody get my email for the planning commission in the afternoon about the updated site plan? Okay, very good. So there's been modification since the planning commission packet was published. So the applicant provided a revised site plan, and we're pleased that they revised the site plan, adds vehicle access to Donaldson Way from the hotel. With the addition, what they had to do was acquire that vacant piece of land on the northwest side of the site. With that acquisition, they were able to get access, but it also allowed them to increase 6 parking spaces from 113 to 119 parking spaces, and they got some more room to add 6 rooms to the hotel. So the hotel increased from 106 rooms to 112. Also, what we found out this week was that we've been working with the applicant and PG&E to see if the utility pole in on the southeast side could be removed, and we've confirmed that it's feasible to remove it this week. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as I get into the presentation. So those are the modifications. And so here's the site features. The site itself is 2.53 acres in the LSMU zone. It's a 112-room Hampton Inn hotel, 3 stories, approximately 61,000 square feet for the 3 stories. The hotel has some amenities, the swimming pool, meeting room, and fitness center. And it now has 119 parking spaces. 5 of them will be ADA, 7 of them electric vehicle parking. It's going to be supported with 0.67 acres of landscaping and 8 bicycle parking spaces. So here's the latest site plan that we received this week. The hotel is shown in dark blue, and the revised site plan itself is shown in the red dotted lines. There will be access to the highway on the southeast corner, direct access to Highway 29 southbound, and then there will be access to Donaldson Way on the northwest side. There's also going to be a pedestrian and bike access going southward to Canyon Plaza Shopping Center.
Okay.
All right, so here we are with the site-specific issues. There are about 5 of them, and I'll go over them briefly. Architecture, a hotel marketing study, hotel brand assurance, the utility undergrounding, and then the pedestrian and vehicle connections. So the architecture of the hotel, when they first submitted, was more of a modern look with the more of a rectangular shaped hotel, clean lines, burgundy, gray, and bluish color. And it didn't look similar to the buildings in the west side of town, of the highway. We gave them some feedback, as well as I think the city council also gave them some feedback about that. And they listened, and they came up with a revised architecture, more of the modern farm style with the hip roof and more earth tone colors. And I think they did a great job. It seems to be consistent with Canyon Plaza's aesthetic and more consistent with the buildings in town overall. So that one's resolved. Do want to mention the hotel marketing study that the EPS conducted for the site. There was some concern of maybe we're having too many hotels in the city, and the applicant provided us this marketing study, and it showed that the Napa Valley does support a diverse tourism market. Hospitality demand and supply has steadily been growing, and they see that hotel market conditions will return in 2021 and 2022. There's an unmet demand for an estimated 275 upper mid-scale and upscale rooms in the southern Napa County area, which is American Canyon, and by 2025. So there is demand for another hotel. And also the hotel would generate 25 jobs on site, and their jobs would total about $1 million in employee compensation and provide tax dollars to the American Canyon General Fund. So hotels, we want to show give you a brief image of where the proposed, existing, and approved hotels are. So we have 3 existing hotels. They're all in the east. They're all east of the highway, which is the Holiday Inn Express on the north side of town, Fairfield Inn, and the Doubletree Inn. We have the Home 2 Suites that received entitlements about a year and a half ago. And then we have this one, the proposed Hampton Inn. Oh, and there's the scheduled luxury boutique hotel in Watson Ranch. So we have 3 that's existing, 1 that's coming, and then 2 proposed. And then we have 2 potential hotel sites. One was the Crawford and 29 site, which is 4 acres. And then the site that's the current Marshall's Honey Farm, they have the possibility of doing a hotel. We actually forwarded the EPS marketing study to Visit Napa Valley, and she helped us review it. And she saw that she was supportive of the hotel as well. She saw that she gave us some feedback about the marketing study, and she explained that hotel occupancy rates have in American Canyon has actually led the Napa Valley during the pandemic. Limited service hotel occupancy outpaced all other sectors during the pandemic. And there's like this niche in the American Canyon hotel industry that includes rooms for essential workers and per diem travelers. And that doesn't change even during downturns. The Cambria Hotel in Napa is nearing completion, and that was included in the EPS report. So they took that into factor. Even with that new hotel, they're saying that there is demand for this Hampton Inn. And lastly, just other hotels are less likely to compete with existing and proposed American Canyon hotels. I think that's due to our location here. So that's the marketing study in a nutshell, and it seems that it was favorable for the Hampton Inn.
On the marketing study, did the city council have they reviewed that marketing study as well?
Yeah, they have, and okay. they found it favorable.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is the third of the site-specific issues is hotel, the Hampton Inn hotel brand assurance. So one of the concerns that the city council had was, we're permitting a hotel, but we want to make sure that when it comes in, it is the Hampton Inn, and not something that's a lesser brand. And so the applicant's response was that, they shown us their franchise agreement with Hampton Inn, and the agreement requires Hampton Inn architects, and the agreement there's a significant financial obligation if they try to opt out of that agreement. But to add some extra insurance into having this type of hotel, staff looked at adding a special development requirement to all of the lodging uses in the LSMU zone. And this is how it's going to read. The requirement is prior to the approval of any discretionary application for lodging in the LSMU zoning district, the applicant shall demonstrate that their proposed project shall meet the criteria to achieve a 3-star or higher rating in the Forbes Travel Guide rating system. So, it's a pretty unique requirement, but when you log into the Forbes Travel Guide, the website, the first 3 words you see is "we verify luxury." So it's one of those things that, if it's good enough for them to get on this 3-star rating, we'll see that we're going to get either a Hampton Inn or a quality hotel that's of a similar type and scale. And that's in the resolution for the LSMU zone change. So the next 2, underground of overhead utilities. The Broadway District specific plan requires new development to underground any existing utility pole that's on site or adjacent to the site. And it took a while for the applicant to do their research and make sure that they can underground. They had 1 pole on the southeast side of the site, and we got confirmation that it is feasible to remove that pole. Here's a picture of the pole, and here is kind of like a plan view showing the pole and where it's connected to on the east side of the highway. What they found out was that they can take power from Donaldson Way, and this pole only services this parcel of Hampton Inn, so it doesn't impact other neighbors or anything like that.
Great.
And PG&E explained that the removal of the pole and wires is feasible, and we've added that as a condition of approval for them to remove the pole prior to construction permits. So that's resolved. Then the last site-specific issue is the pedestrian and vehicle connection. At the city council meeting, the joint city council and planning commission meeting 3 weeks ago, staff identified that they can make a potential connection through Donaldson Way and a connection to Canyon Plaza, along with their proposed Broadway entrance. So 3 different entries to the site. And here is a picture of a vehicle exiting the site from Donaldson, which if you exit on Donaldson, you can get to the intersection, which it offers protection for travelers that are going northbound because there's a light at that Donaldson and Highway 29. It used to be about a week ago that was going to be a condition of approval for the site plan, but now that they've already shown the revised site plan to go off Donaldson, the modified resolution removes that condition, and that's condition I think 10B of the resolution. The last issue is the connection to Canyon Plaza. Canyon Plaza has this, I guess this plaza area here that can connect to their northbound neighbor, and the city council at the workshop, they explained, the city council explained that a pedestrian and bike connection could be made, and the applicant has identified a connection. Here's kind of like a elevation view of the hotel and the adjacent building. They will have a path of travel that includes a wooden bridge that allows travelers to go southbound. I have to orient myself. But so, but when staff looked at it, it looks pretty good. But their preliminary proposal is for a 5-foot wide entry, and we just thought that it's not aligned with kind of the goals of that connection. So we added a condition that says that that pedestrian and bike path would be a minimum of 10 foot wide. So that's it for the site-specific issues. I do want to share some of the public outreach efforts for this project. I know the project has been going on for about a year. There's been significant public outreach that's been made. The applicant conducted their own public outreach efforts in May of this year. They mailed to all the property owners within 300 feet and received 12 letters of support for the project. So that was in the packet. Following that, as the project got more and more refined and ready, the city mailed a friendly notice to the neighbors in September of this year. We didn't get any complaints, so we didn't get any comments during that mail out. Then there was the joint Planning Commission and City Council workshop on October 5th. Then we have our official public notices that went out in the newspaper on 12th of this month, and then today last week we did the published the Planning Commission packet on the website. So, here's a map of the applicants' public outreach efforts and the 12 letters of support that they received from their neighbors. Before I leave the subject, we got a letter of support for the project today from Valerie of the American Canyon Chamber. So hopefully you guys had some time to see that one too. Environmental review, as I mentioned earlier, First Carbon prepared the Broadway District Program EIR, and they prepared the Hampton Inn environmental assessment as well. And the environmental assessment provides a justification for an addendum to the Broadway District Program EIR. So they're good with their compliance with CEQA. And with that, the staff's recommendation is to, 1, approve the resolution to recommend the adoption of an addendum to the Broadway District Specific Plan Program EIR for the Hampton Inn project, and approve, the second one, approves the resolution to recommend adoption of an amendment to the LSMU zone to include lodging as a conditionally permitted use. And lastly, approve the modified resolution to recommend approval of the Hampton Inn CUP, conditional use. I know I went through a lot of information, but the applicant is here as well, and I'm sure he has some words to talk about their project.
Go ahead. Tim.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Al Shagagi from AMS Associate. Before I introduce our team members, I would like to thank Mr. Brent Cooper, Mr. William He, and other staff who worked with us during the past year. I think Mr. He presented and covered the project in depth, but I would like to add a few items. To start, we are very excited to bring this project to City of American Canyon, and we think it will be good fit for the neighborhood and will energize the surrounding businesses. We work with the city staff, listened to their guidance, and incorporated their comments into our plans. We also listened to the City Council and Planning Commission about their concern regarding the access to Donaldson Way. That is why our developer intend to negotiate the access to Donaldson Way. We providing the additional access to toward the bridge, with the bridge which Mr. William indicated. This bridge is for pedestrian access to Canyon Plaza Shopping Center, and we all to the south. We also provide a 12-foot wide sidewalk and a bike lane on Broadway. If you look at the site plan, this sidewalk will continue extend to the frontage of the Canyon Plaza Shopping Center to connect to the existing sidewalk to the shopping center. We are also adding 7 parking stalls for the EV parking stalls. With that said, I would like to add that we are also providing the very nice landscaping with the rainwater treatment features such as a bioretention area in this site. And we are excited to get approval today so we can start building attractive hotel for American Canyon. I also would like to add we are in agreement with all the condition as William provided to you, and you can see it, probably you saw it that before, but respectfully we request item number 10A and 11 to be modified from 10-foot to the 6-foot wide connection path as we currently shown in our plans to the southerly property to shopping center, to existing shopping center. Finally, here we have our developers, Mr. Jay Patel and Mr. Peter Patel, and our architect, Mr. Jeff McAdam from Architectural Dimension, also Ms. Lori Betta, our landscape architect here to answer any question you may have. With that, I want to thank you for your time to listening to our presentation. And we are here to answer any question you have.
Okay. So that concludes the presentation.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you. Okay, so with the end of the presentation, are there any general questions from commissioners?
I have one in relation to the bicycle and pedestrian path. I know the city requested a 10-foot, the applicant is a 6-foot. I guess, what is the need for a 10-foot versus the 6? Why did the city ask for the 10 versus the 6? If it is just bicycle, I mean, there's no emergency access or anything through there. It's just pedestrian or bicycle path, correct?
Uh,
Okay, Commissioner Goff, staff was looking at 10 feet in response to a couple of issues. One of them was a request at the Joint Council Planning Commission meeting that the bridge accommodate both pedestrians and bicyclists. But if you think about a standard sidewalk, I mean, it's 4 feet, maybe 5 if you add a little extra space. But when you're looking at a bridge, you've got these hard railings, so it feels a little more tight. But if you have ever walked with your honey arm in arm on a sidewalk, you tend to occupy the entire sidewalk with 2 people. And so if you think about someone walking across the bridge and then someone else is coming from the other direction, well, then you kind of got to do this and this and make sure you don't bump each other and you single file. And who needs that? So 10 feet is just a little more comfortable for whoever might be coming one direction or another. And also it accommodates, in our view, a better potential for what the commission and council talked about with accommodating bicycle, presumption someone might be riding a bike when someone's walking and vice versa kind of thing. So 10 feet is just a little more comfortable of a distance and kind of making it a little squeezed.
The width of the linear park pathway, that is 8 foot, correct? Is it 4 by 4?
The linear park path on
wetlands.
8 feet. I'm not a scholar, but it's probably somewhere in that nature. The thing with the bridge is you have those railings, which is a little more constricting than just a sidewalk with open air on either side of it. Kind of thing. I don't know if you've ever ridden a bike and you've gotten a little, you've got a bike. If you're riding a bike in a narrow area and you're kind of nervous and you kind of hit yourself on the side. Mm-hmm. It's a relatively short bridge. It's a little more wide, make it comfortable. It's, we're looking, we're talking now about a distance of 4 feet of width on a short bridge made of wood. I don't know. In the grand scheme of things, it would just seem like it's more comfortable and better, more utility just for use, especially when you think about where we started from was vehicle and pedestrian connection, and that went away with very good reason to pedestrian and then suggestion of bicycle accommodation. It's just, I don't know, it's more serviceable when you think about building infrastructure for comfort and convenience in the long term. So that's kind of where we were with the 10 foot.
I would guess going to the applicant, Mr. Shigagi, what his vision of the 6 foot versus the 10 foot, why his reasoning is around the 6.
But the reason we were talking about the 6 foot, because 6 foot fits with the site plan very well. And putting a 10 foot creates a maybe loss in a parking. I don't know, but we may. Also, please keep in mind that, like I said, we are providing a wide sidewalk on the Broadway, also Donaldson, which biker could be using. I don't believe that many biker will be cutting through this hotel to go to the shopping center. Because if you're really a biker, it's a lot easier. You are in the street and you can just come back. And we already, like I said, we extended the sidewalk to front of the shopping center, which gives them a better access to go on there. And this is kind of stays very nice and more attractive as 6 foot. The pedestrian crossing over the bridge. The other things about it too, please keep in mind that I don't believe that many people will be coming and going. And if the biker decides to go, I don't believe that many people are going to be walking in this area. So that's why we thought we just didn't want to we want to keep our site plan the way it is. We think it's more attractive to add some additional landscaping around the walkway to the bridge. So that's what's the reason.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
since we started talking on the topic of the bridge, I thought I'd sort of jump on that. But first, Mr. He, I want to thank you for the great presentation and the summary and all the work you've put into this. And Mr. Shogagi, I do appreciate that you listened to our joint council and planning commission meeting and the concerns we had, and that you did make room for the Donaldson access to the hotel, and that you also have clarified that there are going to be 12 feet wide bicycle and sidewalks on Broadway. Living on the west side of town, and as someone who frequently, bicycles to that area, to the library, to the post office, Canyon Plaza is nearby. I was thinking if I wanted to bicycle there, I would take that Donaldson cut through for the hotel, take the new pedestrian bridge over to Canyon Plaza, and then zip through to the post office or to the library. And the reason why I would do that is because Donaldson on the south side has those lovely new class 1 shared use bicycle path and sidewalk. It really looks just like a double sidewalk, but it is a shared use path, I believe. Is correct, Director Cooper?
I believe it is, yes.
Yes. So I would cut through, because for me personally, as a novice biker, I like to be away from cars. So if I can get somewhere and not be on a road competing with cars, especially a road as busy as James Road, which does not have a bicycle lane, it really has a share the road. You're in the road with the cars. No, not for me. So I definitely would be using this new pedestrian bicycle bridge. And actually, I was going to suggest that instead of 10 feet, it should be 12 feet. I use the wetlands linear path on a regular basis to ride my bicycle. I run on that, I walk on that. I see so many users using that on a regular basis. And I will tell you that the wetlands linear path is not wide enough to accommodate bicyclists. I regularly see bicyclists having near misses with pedestrians. It can be that there's just not enough space. And I think Director Cooper's point about the railings on the bridge, making a more confined place, and you have that choke point, since it is a short space, I would love for it to be 12 feet, and that would make it standard width of the new bicycle sidewalk path that's going to go along Broadway. So if it's possible, I would love to see 12 feet. When I was reading through the documentation for this, I saw so many places talking about the Broadway District specific plan, about how bicycle friendly it was going to be. It's meant to be, bicycle this, bicycle that. And so I think we need to plan for the future. Let's just build it once and build it to accommodate our future need. I mean, we spent a good chunk of time tonight talking about zoning changes for a fossil fuel station moratorium, and that's great. But the next logical step towards, reducing sources of fossil fuel is also thinking about replacing some of our trips with fossil fuel cars to other modes of transportation like bicycles. And so I would love to urge us all to think about, small things that we can do that make a difference, like making this bridge, instead of 10 feet, making it 12 feet. That little extra bit wider will accommodate so many more users. You may have people with strollers, people in wheelchairs, everybody's going to want to go through at a comfortable pace and have enough room. And I think it would encourage the free flow of traffic, to go and mingle and stay in Broadway Plaza on your bicycle, on your car, where you see more of the local retail shops, rather than getting in your car and just driving around and you miss things. I mean, the slower pace, you see more, maybe you shop more, maybe you buy more. So that's my comment on the bridge. I don't know, Chair Navarro, if we wanted to continue discussing it, or if you wanted to open it up for public comments first.
Go ahead and complete yours, and then we'll open public comment after everybody's other comments from commissioners as well.
Okay, so I was also looking more on the bicycle theme. I really think we want to emphasize bicycle accessible. And so when we saw the modified plans, we saw an increase in the number of car parking spaces and the number of rooms. I didn't see any change for the number of bicycle parking. So that's on my mind, that
Okay,
especially if the meeting room is going to be open for public use. And I don't know if the pool and the restaurant and other facilities are open for public use. But when you consider that you may have workers who live local, they want to bicycle there, or you may have residents who are coming to meet people there or use those facilities, I think more bicycle parking would be great. And I happened to be up in Napa at a bike store today. They had a sign in the window. They said you can get 20 bicycles in one car parking space. So I would like to encourage that we look at having more car parking space, more bicycle parking space. And if we need to, maybe we should look at the number of car parking spaces. I mean, if we can get, I don't know if that sign in the bike store was correct, but if it's true that just eliminating 1 or 2 car spaces could give us more bicycle parking, I think that's worth further discussion. And maybe we should, that may be something we want to consider.
okay.
And then I'll just make, and I think I'd like to hear what my fellow commissioners have to say before I go any further. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Altman, I'll put you on the spot next.
Fair enough. Look, I think bottom line is I like the project. I think the project makes sense. I think it fits, and I really am appreciative of the developer to have taken into account the comments, to have gone ahead and acquired the property so that we can get the Donaldson connection. I've got no issue with the additional 6 rooms. I think it's wise of them to add it, because they just incurred an additional cost. I appreciate Commissioner Wong's comments regarding 12-foot versus 10-foot. I think I'm okay with the 10-foot. I don't know that I'm all that keen on the 6-foot. I know material prices in construction have gone up significantly, but you're only talking about a short distance and not all that much more lumber. So it's not like there's cost there, and it wouldn't cost more than 1 parking space. And I believe we're already amply covered in terms of parking spaces for a property of this size. So I'm not as convinced on the need for the 6-foot. If others are inclined to go for the 12, as Commissioner Wong is suggesting, I have no objection to that. But I think a 10-foot minimum is really important. And I will, I guess to the second point that Commissioner Wong brought up regarding bicycle parking, I think there should be more bicycle parking. The sign she saw, I think, was basically if you drop one of the old-fashioned metal bike racks, they probably run about the same length, or if it ran the same length as a car parking spot would, and you dropped it on the long end, and you went, putting the bikes in, what would be across the parking. Yeah, you probably could get about 20, bikes in if they were all jammed tight in that. In reality, I don't know that that's an accurate number. I don't know that's what we necessarily want, is just drop a bike rack out there. I think, our concerns have been more about a little bit more secure bike parking at certain points. And I don't recall, and I'd have to go back and pull up the site plan to see exactly what the bike parking looks like. That's already been discussed and so on. But that's sort of, I'm never going to be opposed to, if it's reasonable, to put in more bike parking. I like cycling. It's been a while since I've done anything really in the way of cycling, but you know, I can't wait for the opportunity to get back on the bike and you know, cycle through town. And this will be just another spot. And you know, who knows if we with the hotel coming, if we have a nice big crossing there. Maybe with some luck, Mr. Hess can find a tenant who's in the bicycle repair and rental business, which would be a wonderful thing for us as a community as well. So that's sort of my comments.
Okay, great. Commissioner Goff, your views or questions?
Sure, I'll jump in on this. I also want to just make sure that the applicant is aware that greatly appreciative of listening to the city's concerns, making the modifications that we've suggested. I mean, I just made a quick list here. The design of the hotel and the project itself, they customize for our needs. The inclusion of the Broadway specific area where you're adding the sidewalks and the bike paths and the landscaping requirements, all of that. Greatly appreciated. The inclusion of EV parking, the Donaldson Way access, above all things, that was a huge thing for everybody involved. I'm glad that happened. The Canyon Oak Plaza, the bridge across, fantastic bicycle parking on the property, EV parking on the property. All of those things I think were just done exceptionally at the city's request, and I really appreciate that. When it comes to the actual bridge itself, I'm a proponent of the 10-foot as well. I think 10 feet is fine. I don't think it needs to necessarily go to 12. While I understand Commissioner Wong's comments about that, there is a significant bike path in front with those sidewalks, and that's where bike traffic should really go. Cutting across the parking lot, while I can understand the desire, it's just not safe to do. Unless there is a clear bike path all the way through the parking lot, and that's not really what we're looking at here. I don't foresee a lot of bike traffic on that short little bridge. I do see pedestrian, I do see wheelchair, I do see people with strollers. I know on the Canyon Plaza side, I know Mr. Hess already talked about landscaping there. They have no desire to move the trees or other things that are there. So it's really that confines that space anyways on their side. So I think a 10-foot is probably sufficient on that. I do, however, agree with bicycle parking, not necessarily more, but secured bicycle parking. I think you're going to find significant number of guests who begin bicycling via the ferry into the river trail, who are going to come and start touring the valley through bicycles only. And one of their concerns is going to be securing their bicycles during overnight stays and that, and not necessarily bringing it into their room. So having some type of secured bicycle parking for your customers, I think would be a huge benefit for your hotel itself. Other than that, I really like what they've done. I like the project in itself. And for, you know, I understand all the bicycling components, but I believe that the walkway and the bicycle path along Broadway really meets the needs of the bicyclers.
Okay, so unless staff or the applicant wants to comment on anything from the commissioners, I can open public comment. So I'll pause. Anything further?
If I can jump in for just a quick second, because the one thing after hearing Commissioner Goff's kind of laundry list of the positives, the one that was missed, which is really also another really key thing that needs to be mentioned as a thank you to our applicant here, is the removal of the power pole. That's just for me, that's a big win for all of us, for them to be able to access power elsewhere and get rid of that pole, which when we started with this looked like it was going to have to be around for a long, long time. So again, thanks and you know, commendations to them for making that happen.
You bet.
Okay. Applicant, do you wish to?
No, we listen to you, and we will talk to the staff to work with those items you are concerned. And you brought it up, so I don't see any things. I just like to defer to Mr. Patel too, if he wants to add something. Jay and Pete, if you guys want to add something, please do so.
Okay. I see your hand up.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Mr. Patel, please unmute yourself.
This is Pinu Patel. Thank you guys for working with us. We appreciate you guys giving us concerns, and we wanted to make sure we address all those comments. And we will look into the bridge. We would like to move forward and get this project going. Instead of we would like to get it going quicker than what we anticipated. But we really appreciate you guys working with us all throughout the process. And William He, thank you for the presentation. It was extremely nice. Thank you.
Okay. With that, why don't we go ahead and open public comment, Ms. Jones?
Yes, we have a couple. Patrick Band had his hand up first. Mr. Band, please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Patrick Band, Executive Director of the Napa County Bicycle Coalition. I'll do my best to keep to 3 minutes, although I've got a lot that we want to share. First of all, we do broadly support this project. We think it's great to have new infill occurring within the city, and having additional hotels seems like a kind of a win-win for the city and the community, particularly with the kind of publicly accessible amenities. Regarding the discussion about bicycle parking, we strongly support Commissioner comments requesting additional bike parking and better bicycle parking. The bike parking that's provided in the plans as of right now are simple U-racks that are just outside the main doors of the hotel. That's fine for short-term bicycle parking in front of a cafe or other kinds of businesses, but for longer-term stays, particularly at a hotel where bicycles might be parked overnight, it's simply insufficient. We also feel that given that the city has adopted a bicycle and pedestrian plan that call for 20% active transportation mode share by the year 2035, that a 15 to 20% share of bicycle parking compared to vehicle parking is appropriate to request. So that would be, given 119 vehicle parking spaces, somewhere between 18 and 24 bicycle parking spaces. I certainly echo Commissioner Goff's comments regarding making sure that bike parking isn't just stacked all tight and frankly uncomfortable for people to access, that it be secure and indoor to a certain extent, recognizing it's not just the visitors to the hotel, but it's also employees, janitorial, and other vendors who might be arriving by bike. We're seeing a huge uptick in the number of bicycle touring companies that are active in the Valley, particularly with the prevalence of electric bicycles in recent years. Secondly, we did want to provide or confirm that both bicycle and pedestrian access, in addition to vehicle access, would be provided via Donaldson Way. That's really critical for us when we think about how are these people who are staying at this hotel going to access the incredible amenities such as Wetlands Edge and the Napa River area, which is a great place to go check out as you're staying in the Valley if you've got a morning off from your trip.
Mr. Band, 30 seconds, please.
I'm going to go a little bit over, so I hope that that's okay. Regarding the bridge connection and standards between the proposed 6 feet and 10 feet, I mentioned in chat, I just want to restate here that according to the California MUTCD, a minimum of 8 feet and a preferred width of 10 feet is required for a Class 1 multi-use facility. We're certainly very appreciative of the width on the Broadway corridor, although we do want to note that with as many as 48,000 vehicles a day on Broadway, according to Caltrans, that additional treatments to provide vegetation and kind of lower the sense of being right out front against the traffic for bicyclists and pedestrians who might use that main sidewalk is really critical to us. So I'll end my comments there, and thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Band. Next person, Ms. Jones?
Yes, we have Chris James. Mr. James, please unmute yourself. Oh. There you go, Chris.
Yes.
There you go. I was unmuted and muted and muted. Unmuted. Okay, thanks for this topic again this evening. I have a long list similar to Patrick. I'm hoping I can get through it. I'll try to be brief. So I'm a little concerned still about highway access on 29. My interpretation of when the discussion was, the joint discussion you had with council, I thought that was going away. I didn't think it was going to be any access on 29. So that's, something I would like to hear your opinion on. One of the concerns I have is that as they exit there, heading south, they'll run right into that deceleration lane for Canyon Plaza there, with the Plaza. So how traffic is going to move out of that lane into traffic is a concern to me. They're going to just basically drive into that plaza. And then why don't they have a deceleration lane? They're going straight out of the highway, whereas Plaza, there was a requirement for deceleration lanes and acceleration lanes. So I'm a little concerned how that's going to work out. Bicycle parking, I think, is very important. Locked is important. It's already been covered. The bridge, I think access from Donaldson heading south, either out of the hotel or if you're passing through or using the facilities, coming in from outside the facilities. There's a substandard sidewalk north of the development they're not responsible for, but that connects to the bicycle path on Donaldson. So they would cut through that parking lot, right? There's no real sidewalk on 29 north of there, that whole hokey corner that's going on with the businesses there. So there's going to be a nice bicycle path in front of it, but then maybe the Canyon Plaza, but then there's nothing either side of that. So they're going to end up cutting through and heading out the backside onto Donaldson, I think, to be safe. That's what I would do. And then I want to bring up about EV chargers. That was mentioned tonight. I think there's not enough. I think they were saying there was one or two. I think it wasn't covered in detail in the document. I don't think so. I'm concerned that people charging overnight. People tend to plug their cars in when they go to bed. They're going to leave it plugged in, and then it'll be just consumed overnight. The car will charge. These are going to be slow level 2 chargers and not very fast. You're not going to have someone managing those and moving it from car to car. So the more, I think we need more chargers on there. And then this whole thing of dropping the conditional use requirement for Donaldson, they bought the property, but that all could get back. I still would like to see that in some sort of writing saying that is going to happen, the access on Donaldson. So you're saying they're going to remove that condition, and then they could just renege on that deal, right, and just back that out. So I'm a little concerned about that. And I do like that they listened. So some positives. I do like they listened about the power, the access in Donaldson, and I'm surprised that Commissioner Altman hasn't mentioned solar yet. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. James. Next caller or public comment?
We have no hands raised. If you have public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Going once, twice. Okay, no one's raising their hand.
Okay, so we will go ahead and close public comment. And
Navarro, if you don't mind, I have one
sure.
comment that Mr. James made about the Donaldson Way access.
Sure.
When a site plan is approved, it's the site plan is approved, and so we didn't see the need for a condition to describe something that's depicted in the site plan. We have a condition at the beginning of the list of conditions of approval that says that this approval is for development of the site, and it describes the site plans. And so